Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Healing Outside the Box. My name is Jean Tiberio, and I'm a nutritionist and a wellness coach. Today's episode is 225, and I'm calling this, It's Not Your Grandma's Shingles Anymore. But before we get to that, I want to tell you about the lovely day I had going to a play in Gloucester, Massachusetts. Now, going to a matinee on a weekend afternoon, I fear has become a thing that fewer and fewer of us do, which is sad because live theater is a unique experience. So anyway, this play was called The Lifespan of a Fat. The play starred Lindsay Krause, who's been in many movies, including her first, All the President's Men, The Verdict, The Insider, House of Games, Places in the Heart, Slapshot, etc. Currently, she is the judge on Law and Order. You could probably picture her now. She stands tall and regal, almost statuesque. Anyway, we got a chance to meet and chat with Lindsay Krause after the play. The four of us were standing outside on the sidewalk on an absolutely gorgeous day, just chatting about the play, and Lindsay walks up and starts talking with us. It was really cool to get her perspective on the play as well. So the play is about truthiness, as Stephen Colbert would have described it. The Lindsay Krause character plays the editor of a prestigious news magazine. A famous writer was assigned a serious story about death by suicide. The writer decided to tell a true story in a loosey-goosey type of way, meaning that he didn't bother to get all of the details quite right. He exaggerated, and in one instance, actually lied about how this woman had committed suicide in order to get a more dramatic story. Now, this story about suicide was brilliantly written and interesting, but factually flawed. The Lindsay Krause character grapples with the decision about whether or not to publish it, with her deadline looming, and ultimately makes the correct decision to kill the entire story. So this is clearly a play about how important it is to get the story straight at a time, let's say around now, when many of our political leaders are stumbling into a future they may not be able to control. Like our current political times, this play is about truthiness. And, well, maybe this podcast episode as well. A bit. So I'm going to make the following disclaimer up front. This episode is one big thought bubble that I'm having. I'm not an expert on shingles, nor am I a nurse or a physician. This is basically my story that I want to tell in the event that any of you run into the same dilemma. If I walk into the doctor's office thinking I have shingles and knowing that it's important to get treated immediately, what if my doctor doesn't believe me? So again, I don't in any way presume to know much about shingles or be a substitute in any way for proper medical care. I fall into the town crier category because I think it's important for people to be able to see a particular rash in the morning and be able to get treatment at the doctor's office, hopefully in the next 24 hours. In other words, if you suspect that your rash is shingles, you should probably go straight to the doctor's office or any of the local urgent care facilities. The reason, so I'm told, and I've read this in many places, is that a delay in the treatment following that initial rash may result in a more painful outbreak. First, let's go through the history. Now, I'm getting this from WebMD, and I'll give you the link to this in the show notes. Over the past 5 or 6 decades, there has been a steady rise in the number of shingles cases. It is occurring more in middle-aged and even some younger adults, say in their 30s. This WebMD article says that from 1945 to 1949, only 0.76 out of 1,000 people got the disease. In other words, less than 1 in 1,000. And usually in the elderly. Now the projections are more like 1 in every 4, or maybe even 1 in every 3, who will get shingles sometime in their lifetime. Now, this virus first invades when you get the chickenpox, usually in childhood. The chickenpox virus lays dormant in your nerve cells. Then it wakes up and presents itself as shingles. The various articles I've seen suggest that the outbreak might be related to stress. It could be either a physiological stress, like pneumonia, or it could be a psychological stress, say the death of a family member. I remember my neurologist once told me many years ago that he saw a patient with mild rheumatoid arthritis who then suffered a traumatic event, and then their arthritis suddenly got worse. The elderly get hit the hardest. Part of the problem there seems to be that their immune system weakens with age. Therefore, it may not need to be such a great stress to trigger it again. That there tells me that the outbreaks are tied to immune system function. And what have we been having problems with over the past 20 or 30 years? You guessed it, our immunity. Many diseases that a nutritionist deals with, such as ulcerative colitis or irritable bowel syndrome, are now seen in alarming rates. The rates of shingles outbreaks rose 39% between 1992 and 2010 for people 65 and over. And that's according to this WebMD article. There was a personal story written by a Canadian journalist who was diagnosed with shingles when she was only 36 years old. I'll put a link to this in the show notes as well. She was so shocked that she felt that she had to write about it. Her article is entitled, "Why Are More and More Canadians Getting Shingles?" Now you know the National Institute of Health, or NIH, is going to get into the act when they notice an increase in disease rates, and nobody knows why. This article that I'm discussing is about what are they doing with the research, and I'll give you a link to it in the show notes. Basically, they described the first symptoms of shingles that most but not all people experience. The first symptom of shingles is often a burning or tingling pain, or sometimes an intense itch, generally in a band-like distribution on one side of the body. It could be around the waist, on the chest, on the stomach, or even back. The sores will usually be in a curved or circular pattern, but not always. I once described it as sores looking more like a comet with a light pink tail following the red bump. I also mentioned once that the pattern looked a bit like the Big Dipper, with dots presenting in a curved line. I know, more references to space. I must have been mad at the Let's Go to Mars people, because they're just sitting around at that NASA space station, not fixing the planet that we got, which has oxygen and water. Anyway, the sores can also be clumped together. It could be 3 tiny sores, or it could, unfortunately for some people, be a lot of sores together in a huge batch. The pattern could look like a circle with jagged edges, but sometimes the sores could merge together. Now, most doctors may say this is not possible, but someone told me that, in addition to the initial cluster, they had a single sore on the same side of their body, all by itself. It itched or burned. Doctors may also say this is not possible, but I have heard and seen 2 separate clumps of sores. There may be an initial clump, and then a second clump appears in a curved pattern somewhere on the same side of the body. Then I asked an emergency room physician once if it is possible for the shingles to jump quadrants of the body, and she said yes. In other words, I was asking, can they appear on your left arm and on your right leg? She said it's possible, but again, most physicians will say it's not. The clusters most often appear in a band that they call a dermatome, which contains nerves that branch out from the virus-affected nerve root that exits the spine. Again, the sores usually appear somewhere on the trunk of the body, but they can also occur on the neck and face. There has been a couple of cases that I know of where there was a single red dot in a separate location, which was also itchy, then burned. By the way, if the itchiness is overwhelming, sometimes Gold Bond powder can make it feel a little better, or even a bag of ice. Now, the shingles pain can be mild or intense. Some people may have itching, but not much pain. In that case, the itching could be really intense. Some people feel severe pain from the gentlest touch, such as the weight of your bed linens or clothing. A few people may have general symptoms of a viral infection, like fatigue, fever, headache. As with almost any painful neurological condition, anxiety can be a huge problem. That's usually listed as a symptom. For example, and I'm taking this from my own experience, you're watching a TV show and the ads come on. Then another ad and another ad. By the time you get to the 5th or 6th ad, you want to throw the TV out the window. Now, usually, but not always, the rash will look like blisters. And that's after, say, 3 to 7 days. The sores are often described as scaly. And of course, like chickenpox, they all tell you not to touch it. Recent studies have shown that subtle cases of shingles with only a few blisters are more common than previously thought. So these cases may go unrecognized, which means there may be an underreporting of the incidence. Now, shingles can last from 2 to 6 weeks. Sometimes the pain associated with the shingles can linger even longer. The ongoing pain is called post-herpetic neuralgia, or PHN, and this will get less severe over time. So, as I hinted at, I did break out in shingles many years ago, so I have my own personal story as well. About 8 years ago, on a very hot summer day, it was between 95 and 100, I was outside without the benefit of shade. We were at a picnic. For some reason, there was also no bottled water. There was only soda available, which can sometimes make matters worse if you're fighting dehydration. It didn't take long before I became suddenly lethargic, but then I got relief on the way home and seemed okay. And then 2 days later, first thing in the morning, I saw a spotted rash in the form of a jagged circle on the right side of my stomach. The circle was about, say, 6 inches in diameter, and it had that comet-like appearance. The big red mark with a pink tail. The rash was bright red, like almost a brick red. It was itchy at the time, but not painful. Now, I had a grandmother with shingles, and for some reason, that was the first thought that popped up in my head. I called my doctor and insisted on being seen, and in fact was seen that morning. I showed my doctor the rash and said, "This looks like shingles to me." And my doctor said, "Oh, I don't think so. Maybe it's poison sumac." I should have learned this by now, but whenever I try to diagnose myself, which is most of the time, I get some blowback from my doctor. I started to get anxious, because after all, that's part of the problem, and insisted, a little bit sarcastically, that I haven't been walking in the woods in my bathing suit for some time, as I've been in a wheelchair since 1992. I try not to be sarcastic, but every once in a while, the words just come tumbling out. So anyway, I think I recall her continuing to support her position that it's poison sumac. She came up with the suggestion that my home health aide went walking in the woods and got poison sumac. And I think I said something like, "Well, I don't have any aides with poison sumac because A, I don't know anyone that walks in the woods, and B, I live on the ocean. No woods, no sumac." I finally said something along the lines of, "Can you just humor me and please give me the antiviral medication?" She did, and the bright red sores started to fade to pink in the next few days. Now, I did have some pain and anxiety related to that initial outbreak for a few months, but I believe that it would have been much worse if I had waited to get treated. I did get a second outbreak years later when I was sick with some type of infectious thing, and again I had to twist the arm of another physician to get the antiviral medication. So what I've seen, on myself anyway, is the initial rash in a curved pattern which formed a circle and a separate bump or two somewhere else. And again, I had a single spot on my face that was very red and then blistered. It went from itchy to burning like the other shingles sores. I went to my dermatologist, when the sore on my face popped up and wasn't going away. They biopsied the spot, and sure enough, it was a basal cell carcinoma. Here's my opinion on all of this. It seems to me like it may be similar to something like autism. In other words, as these illnesses become more common, we are seeing variations in how it presents itself. Again, just my opinion. Thought bubble. Now, once you have shingles, your doctor may prescribe an antiviral med such as acyclovir. These antiviral meds should be taken as soon as possible after you see the first rash. And I perhaps don't need to tell you, since you're listening to my podcast, but good nutrition and sufficient sleep are important when you're sick because they may help your immune system kick in and become strong again. Now, the experts suggest you wash your hands often. You may not want to scratch your skin when they're in the blistery stage, and then move your hand to another part of your body where the virus maybe can seep in if you have microscopic cracks in your skin. But not everyone thinks that you may be able to spread it by picking at your sores and then touching another area of your body. They may say it just doesn't happen. But it's always a good idea to keep your hands clean anyway. I was advised to keep the sores dry, if possible, again with Gold Bond powder or something similar. It does cool the itch, and I don't imagine it can hurt. Shingles isn't contagious, but I suppose you can give chickenpox to someone while you have it, if that person has not had chickenpox. If that other person has had the chickenpox vaccine, they're all set. Now, trying to reduce your stress level while you're sick certainly can't hurt and may be able to help. This is easier said than done because anxiety is a usual symptom. But it is certainly worth giving meditation or deep breathing exercises a try. If you don't yet have shingles and want to prevent it, the first step may be to talk to your physician about possibly getting a shingles vaccine. Your doctor will know all the rules about that. The second step may be to think about some type of stress reduction technique. It can be anything that suits your needs and your schedule. There's mindfulness meditation, transcendental meditation, chanting meditation, deep breathing exercises, yoga, etc. They have free techniques for you to try on YouTube, and there certainly may be local groups available in many areas for yoga and/or meditation. In addition, it may be good to consider thinking about what triggers your stress. Since we all seem to have phones or computers, you can jot it down in a journal-type form and chart your progress if you like. Also, getting a good night's sleep is very important. Just about anyone will tell you that. Some people like to wind down by reading or listening to music or watching a comedy on TV. Creating a "this is what I do" routine will help your body recognize when it's time to go to sleep. Eating healthy is always a good idea. I imagine you knew I would say that. And it also helps to eat with people that you just enjoy being with. Remember, eating is meant to be a social occasion. It seems so obvious, but we need to be reminded of that, especially in today's world. And as I like to say, this is when you need to turn to animals. And by this, I mean stressful periods of your life that are sometimes unavoidable. So spend some time with your pet. If you don't have a pet, walk your neighbor's dog, or go to a butterfly park, or visit a petting zoo, whatever rows your boat. It also helps to spend time in nature, taking quiet walks in peaceful surroundings, listening to the birds chirping. Another thing you could do is join a support group. I don't suggest a support group for people suffering from shingles. That could be a bit stressful in itself. It could be one of those meetup groups that focus on a person's interests. I happen to belong to a cookbook lovers meetup group, and it's run by a wonderful woman who's a real foodie and gets very excited about her potluck dinners. You could also add regular exercise into your daily or weekly routine. Runner's high is really a thing. So jogging, riding a bicycle, going for a hike, are all examples of exercises that maybe you can incorporate into your routine, and it will help you with your stress level as well. So in conclusion, the truth about this condition is that we don't have all the facts to back up what we believe. But if we try something that we believe may work for us, then it may very well work for us. And that's the truth. That's all I have for you today. Be well and stay tuned next week for another episode of Healing Outside the Box.